Hello and welcome back to Cisco Knowledge Base. This is Zach from Content Security Team. Today we'll discuss a new topic which is going to be offered with the Cisco Hybrid Web Appliance. This will cover steps to configure Cisco Hybrid Web Appliance and ScanCenter Cloud Portal to use the Active Directory group-based authentication. So yes, it definitely sounds like a mouthful, but the idea behind, in a nutshell, is to have your local web security appliance join an Active Directory domain, and these groups on the AD side of it will be pushed to ScanCenter Cloud Portal and enforces the policy through the Cloud Portal. To do that, this is the functionality that has been added and offered with the Async OS 9.2.0 with the build 51 and above. These are the documentation link where this permanently will reside, the user guide. This is for Hybrid Web Appliance user guide, and this is for the ScanCenter admin guide. So what we have done is we divided, since there is a lot of configuration option for the lab and demo purpose, we have divided these in 3 different parts. So part 1, we'll configure 3 Active Directory groups on the AD server, and these are the steps. We'll walk through it. Once we create these groups, then we'll create 3 different users for each group, so we can have a different desired results for testing purpose. After creating the AD group and users in step 1 and 2, we will tie each user into the group. So for example, user 1 will be part of the group 1, user 2 will be part of group 2, and user 3 for part group 3, so that we can push those Active Directory group to the Cloud Portal, and then we can test it that way. Step 2, we walk through how to join Active Directory domain, which is not a new functionality, it just existed today, but I have included 2 video knowledge base, NTLM and LDAP, in the event if we need it. These are on the Cisco support community. Then we'll look at the auth identity on the Cisco Hybrid Web Appliance, and which is exactly the same we do it today under Web Security Manager and Auth ID. Authenticated user, NTLM realm, and we force it to NTLM MSSP. Additionally, we added the subnet, where the client will be coming from for testing purpose. Moving on to part 3, and that is the most extensive part, where it's a lot of new pieces need to put together. First, we need to create these Active Directory group, and it must match the group name what we have created in our AD server on locally. So by default, if there's a lot of groups that get created when we promote a server to an Active Directory server. So first part need to happen, we're going to log into our ScanCenter portal account. From the main page, admin, management, we add a group, and this requires a particular syntax. Then we'll talk a little bit more detail, and we'll look at the group that I've created on the ScanCenter portal as well. Here's the syntax format that is also enforced on the Cloud Portal in the event we need it. So WinNT, whack, NetBIOS name, and then there is a Active Directory group name after that. In the step 2, we're going to create a filter on a ScanCenter Cloud Portal. And then the step 3 would be the rule. So which rule will tie with the filter and the group? Again, once we do an example, will make a lot more sense. That's where the rule get ties together will be look like. These are the rules. User 1, user 2, user 3. Initially, when we first register our Cisco web appliance, we have the default policy. So these are the policy we created. Again, we'll look at the ScanCenter portal, it'll make a lot more sense. So this is an example of creating a rule. Once we create a rule, we set up an action for the rule. That could be block, allow, anonymize, warn, and authenticate. This is a group that we're tying with this filter, with the rule rather, and the filter. So when we create a rule, we're going to tie a group, we're going to tie a filter, and we also have an option to choose a schedule from it. So it could be any time, it could be just the working hours, weekend hours, and so on and so forth. This is mostly like a time-based ACL. I have added some of the troubleshooting caveats, what we can check in the event if the groups are not matching. So for example, we can look at the transaction log, access log, hybrid D log, which is added. %M is also can be added as a custom field in the access log, so we can see how we're negotiating. Is a basic NTLM, Kerberos for that matter, as far as the authentication method. So when we're creating a group ScanCenter, we're going to use a NetBIOS name. So if, for example, if my domain name is ntlm.domain.com, my NetBIOS name is NTLM, and that's where it will be used. Hybrid D-log can be looked at the trace level. They give you a lot of information, but it's important to put it back on level 3. Here's another example or look for how the groups would be tied in. So in NT domain name, NTLM in my case, / directory name, or this is a group name. Currently SOCKS, FTP, and upstream proxy is not supported, and reporting will be done through the Splunk application. And by default, we pull and sync these policies at every 122nd, which is about 2 minutes. These are the sample access log, then we'll go over more in detail. Hybrid D-log sample look like when we pull these group on the ScanCenter Cloud Portal from the web security appliance, our hybrid D-log will be look like this. So hybrid D-log is communicating between web appliance and ScanCenter portal. So I have 3 users. This is a group for user 1. Then second one is for user 2, and all these groups, some of them are snipped here. Then user 3. So in the environment, if it's large, if you have thousands of users or hundreds of users, we do not want to do level 5 trace level, otherwise it will be very chatty. So these capture on level 3. So let's go on top of the page, starting from the top. Let's look at the user guide. So here's the first user guide for WSA, and that's where all the documentation will reside for configuration. This is a configuration guide place for ScanCenter for administrators. You can go and pull these config. Okay, so we'll start with the step 1, which is looking at the Active Directory group and run through these. Here is the AD servers that I have. Start. admin tool, computers. So this is the AD domain right here. And in order for create a group, you do a right click on it, new, groups. Here the group name would be these value, which is the group scope and group type. It defaults to security and global. You can leave that as a default value. It does not need to change. So in my test, I've created these three groups. Group 1, all access, user 1, 2, and then 3. So that's the one part. Then the second one is to create a user. Similarly, we say right click on the users. We say user and just walk through this. And in my case, I have user 1, 2, and 3. The third step here is to tie those users into the group. And if you look at it here, we'll look at the property of my user. Actually, we need to go on the user itself and profile and account. Actually, member of. Here is the user 1. This is the user 1 that is belong to group 1 all access user 1. So this is basically group 1. Same thing with the group 2 and group 3 is belong to user 2 and 3. This is user 1. So let's quickly look at the user 3 as well. He is a member of group 3. And we went in a reverse order. Just quickly we can take a look at the last one here. User 2, he should be member of group 2. Long name, group 2. So that's the part 1. Okay. So we just went through the entire part 1 here on the Active Directory server. The part 2 for hybrid web appliance, let's jump on there. So on the web security appliance, let's try that. First thing is to joining the Active Directory domain, AD realm. If you look at it, this is the same as we do it today. That's why I have added a couple of resources, how to join AD domain. Let's take a quick peek. IP address, FQDN, etc. Once you join the AD domain, there are identification under Web Security Manager, but if you notice, there is no access policy option to create access policy locally. Reason for that is all the policies created and managed on the portal. So here's my identification. I call it hybrid NTLM auth ID, auth users, NTLM enforced to NTLM MSSP, give them a subnet where the client will be coming from, and essentially this is a host on the AD server that I've been testing with the different users. It could be administrator if you logged in as user 1, 2, and 3 on the other scenarios. So that's the AD piece, that a web security piece that it needs to be configured, and that covers this here. Okay. Okay, so we just talked about these pieces here, part 2. We'll continue on to part 3. In part 3, it will require us to configure the ScanCenter Cloud Portal, and that's where we're going to have to create these Active Directory groups it will match the name exactly as it is on the AD side of it. So let's log in there. Quick. So let's look at the notes real quick. In order to create a group, first you need to go into admin. Maybe side by side might be useful. Okay. Under admin, oh, it locks you out. Email address. So we'll go under admin to create a group under management, and then we'll say groups. That's where these are my current group, and if you notice, these group matches exactly I have on the Active Directory. First one is group 1 all access user 1, then group 3 for some reason is before than 2, maybe I created that way. Group 2, and just to have some significance here, group 1 will have access to everything. Group 2 will get an EU and injected a warning page. Group 3 will block all the access. So that's the idea. To create a group, you add group, and that's where the name would be. The other thing to notice is for Active Directory group, this need to be picked directory group here. And you type in WinNT, just like you have it below here. Syntax WinNT, this is a domain name. This is your directory name or group name. So in my case, WinNT colon whack whack NTLM is a NetBIOS name, and this is important. Not the fully qualified domain name as I have configured as a ntlm.domain.com. So it'll be NTLM as a NetBIOS name, then the group name. So once you're done, hit submit. So once you create the group, the next thing is to create a filter. So you go under web filter, management, filter, and that's where you say create filter. So we can create by category. These are the category by default here. Right, so then you have by domain, content type, file type. There are all these options can be used, regular expression. So just for the demo purpose, I've created 3 different filters. We'll look at those. Actually, more than 3, I believe. So I have all access, block access, and then some warning access. These are for groups, and I have some others. So to look at it, so I'll allow all access. Again, just to keep it consistent, what I have done, I choose the category news, and then search engine for allow. So that's the second step. You, after creating a group and you creating a filter, then the third part would be to create rules. Okay. So that's where you create a rule. In that rule, when you create a rule, you give it a name, demo rule. This is the action. It can be allow, anonymize, warn, authenticate. Action on that. This is the group that I'm going to add for that particular rule. So these are my default group that comes with the ScanCenter portal account, which has permit everything. These are my Active Directory group that I've configured. I can select here or deselect. Once you select or deselect, it's a toggle switch, whichever group I want to add here. Once you do that, you add your filter. These are all my filter. And one thing to note that I've learned, once you just pick it, it's not going to have automatically. You have to click Add in order to display this. The bottom one is the more granular control. If you want during the lunch hour, working hours, anytime, by default is more lenient, it's anytime allowed. So once we have created that rule with the AD group, filter, and schedule if needed, plus most important part, what is the rule you want to apply? Allow, block, anonymize, and warning. Then you hit submit or create rule rather. We'll cancel out here. We'll look at these rules. So these are the 3 rules. The idea was to group 1, user access. User 1 will have access to everything in action. Group 2 will get a notification or warning page. Group 3 will block all the access, whatever is in that custom filter. Again, I have a search engine and news, just to kind of keep it consistent. And in the default last, you can have it either block all or allow. So we'll look at one of the rules here. So this is my first rule, and notice group 1 all access user 1. I try to match that name, so just to keep things simple. Description, allow access, allow. This is my first group that has a user 1 tied into it. This is my filter that allow access to those 2 sites. We said CNN.com news and also the search engines. And I left the default to anytime, just to keep things simple. Okay. Well, let's make it a little bit bigger. So what we just talked about it in part 3, we looked at how to create the AD group on ScanCenter portal, how to create a filter. Once you create the filter, then you create a rule. Once you create the rule, the final step is to how you tie them all together. So associate an action, a group, filter, and filter, and then anytime, the meaning if you want to have a more granular action. So this is where everything comes together. Once this is all done, for my lab testing, I've been testing with, let's say this is one of the Active Directory server, we'll show in a second. What we can also do is look at the access log while we're testing it. So for my example, if you look at this access log, this is a basic info IP address. First one was NTLM user 1. This is my NetBIOS name for a domain. This is a group 1 all access user 1. This is the first group that is on my ScanCenter cloud portal. This is my local ID on hybrid web appliance, and rest of the information is pretty standard. I also have a %m in it, so that logs the authentication method, and this is NTLM. My user 2 that I have blocked continue because I set it up for a warning. When you set up for a warning, this is the default behavior or expected behavior. That page will display this. User need to accept this notification and continue on. This will logs your username, your domain, IP, and timestamps. And also, if you notice, this is the group 2 warning. So that's what the naming was for. So it's supposed to inject a warning, which it did. and then URL category plus the hybrid NTLM auth ID. This is from Web Security Appliance Identification. Once user 2 continue and clicks that accept that notification, then it will fetch those page 200. And then third test, the third group that I had for user 3 to block all the access, block webcat again. Now the matches group 3 block all access, user 3. URL category, and then this is a hybrid NTLM auth. This is again Cisco Web Appliance Identification. Another example for that, and this is the block page, and pretty standard, which we see it today. Just have a lot more information than block and continue. This will tell you it's a block webcat, IP address, website. This is one of the search engine. So if you remember in my filters, I have the filter to block to check the category for search engine and the news. So the last one, it's from the Active Directory server logged in as an administrator. When you're logged in as an administrator, you're not a user 1, user 2, or user 3. So you automatically hit default policy on the ScanCenter Cloud Portal, but you still match this identity because I'm coming from the same machine, which is here, 172.18.249.239, which is all along using the same machine, just different users. So this is from sample from the hybrid D-log. One is pulling down these groups. You can tail it. Again, these information can be very detailed if you're running on level 5. As you can see it, for each group is going to pull these down. And all these groups that you have created any custom groups, that should come a part of this as well. As we see it here, domain name 3, and these are for all these users. Great. With that, we'll look at some of the hybrid D-log. And over here. So this is a hybrid D-log that I'm running currently just for the demo purpose. I'm running in the trace level so we can have a lot more information. So here we go on the top of the page, should have, okay. So if you look at it, it goes through how many policies and how many time is attempting to get refresh, policy required, and if we make any modification on the portal, and that will populate. So remember, it takes 2 minutes for about to do that. So let's go and jump on the portal. We'll change one of them. We'll say block, save it, and we'll change it back. Also, for the default, we'll change that to block. So remember, any changes are done here, it takes 120 seconds, depend where you at on the cycle. So here, it's going to start triggering some of the data coming up here. At the same time, what we can do, we can look at some of the logs. So here's some of the actual log coming from, these are HTTPS, and HTTPS authentication is also supported. we'll look at the Active Directory. So this one I am logged in as user 2. So if we look at the user 2 policy, here should be have warning page for any website. So this is user 2. So I hit a site before. So this is the site, as I said before, we were doing a search engine and also a news site. So with the yahoo.com, it tells me the NTLM user 2, and this is the policy. I have to click accept to continue on because I've enforced it warning page, which is coming from over here, right there. Okay. Then what we can do is we can log in as user 3. We'll log out. Okay. Make sure this is we just logged in, should be as a user 3 now, and as user 3 for search engine we said instead of giving a warning we should block it, and this is a block page you would display. And if we go back and look at our policy for user 3, this is all block, and user 1 is all allowed, so it's all good there. Let's take a look here real quick. Our hybrid D log. So here's what triggers this. Anytime when we make a change, this will trigger for all the users if you are running in trace level, which is level 5. So this one it displays the checking for the auth group. The domain name is NTLM, which is matches here what we have configured. Essentially it's a NetBIOS name. The fully qualified domain name is ntlm.domain.com. So that was user 2. Then we have user 3 here. And we should have user 2 as well, which it shows up here. So hybrid D log it's a very good log. It provides a lot of information. If anything is happening in terms of your groups are not matching, just make sure the group names are correct. The NTLM domain name using NetBIOS on the portal, etc. And here as well, we'll show you what data, what policy is pulling. And one more thing to point out is, even though once it pulls down this group and it says command session actually committing generated policy data, what next thing need to happen is policy data committed. For whatever reason, if this is not committed, it means the change that has not reflected. This committed must be seen in the hybrid D log in order for us to see the groups properly. Is the access log, there's no surprises there, apart from you can look at with the %m, and the group itself on the access log will be coming from the portal. Okay, with that, let's do a quick review. So the topic we talked about it today is the steps to configure Cisco Hybrid Web Appliance and ScanCenter Cloud Portal to pull the Active Directory group and then create an authentication. First part, creating a group on the AD server, unless you want to use just a custom or default groups. Once you create those groups in the AD server and users and allocate those users to those particular group, 3 steps. Part 2, join the Active Directory domain on a hybrid web appliance. And again, there is no functionality changes there that existed today. I've included a couple of knowledge base there. Create an identification, enable authentication, add an IP address, and there are a couple of other URL, port base, and category. You can add those. Step of part 3, which is steps to configure ScanCenter Active Directory group filter. First we create a group, add a group, then we create a filter, then we create a rule. Once we create a rule, then we time all together with the action, group, filter, and more granular control if needed. If the groups are not working, what are the things that you can check so far? Looking at the access log, auth log, hybrid dlog, %m you can add. That will display if this is speaking NTLM-MSSP or not, or basic or whatnot. Hybrid dlog in level 5. Actually, I missed one. More important, NetBIOS name. So when you create the group, use the NetBIOS name. So for example, here, I'm using NTLM. Trace level, revert back to 3. Once you're done, we need to pick directory group when you create a group. Other is custom, so pick a directory group. And here is the syntax, domain name, and the directory of the path. And reporting will be all done through this Splunk. By default, we pick 120 seconds. These are some of the access log. I had user 1, 2, and 3 created. And user 1 have all access. User 2 had a warning page and shows block continue webcat with the page display here. User 3, I had to block all the access. So block webcat, actually webcat block. With the detailed page it will display at the user front. Some of the hybrid log in a trace mode, and Active Directory, sync up between Active Directory and the Web Security Appliance and Policy Management Portal. And these are all the groups. With that, that brings us to conclusion. Thank you so much for joining and watching this, and definitely this video knowledge has gotten a little bit longer than I would anticipated, but I definitely wanted to cover all the details to make it useful. Once again, thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you in another knowledge base. Again, this is Zach from Content Security Team. Thank you. Bye-bye.